Welcome to The Bold Blueprint, a podcast for modern educators who dare to think differently. Here we explore the intersection of education and leadership, diving into bold strategies, innovative teaching, and the mindset shifts that drive real impact. Whether you're in the classroom, leading a team, or shaping the future of education, this is your space to learn, grow, and lead with confidence. Here we are, another episode, another podcast, another extra special guest. Hey, Barbie.
Hey, Jamie, how are you going?
Well, I don't know if you're watching this on YouTube for all of our listeners, but I watched myself for the last episode. I was like, I need better lighting. So I'm hoping I don't have the dark circles under my eyes this time round. But I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good. I loaded up on concealer. I don't even know how to use it properly, but just for that. And I've avoided watching myself to see what I look like on this, but could ignore that one.
Oh, no, that's awesome. I am so excited to have our special guest today. I'm off a bit of a like emotional high last night, and I was talking about in the prep lead up to this session. Where we had a national team meeting last night about a lot of the changes that are coming into play. If you're listening to this in 2025 in September about digital devices and all the things that are happening in the media and everything. And I learned something. I didn't realize Google Meet can only house 500 screens. So that was that. We had about 670 people online. But I have to say, Barbie, there's so much anxiety in the sector right now. And there's so much worry and there's so much fear. There's so many things that we're seeing in our space. And having to have a discussion with leaders, with educators about, the importance of what we do and having a child safe environment and having a space where we show up every day and be our best version of ourselves with whatever that means. Don't know what that means, but being able to see through a day that's already historically quite complex, with all the added layer and pressure. So Barbie, I'm thrilled for us to be able to talk to Freya. Hey Freya, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Jamie. Thank you for having me. And Barbie, thank you for having me too. It's really exciting to be here.
You
More than
guys have
welcome.
some history, right?
Oh, yeah, we do. We do. We've had some fabulous coffee on the northern beaches of Sydney and some really interesting chats. And yeah,
I
we go back.
Yeah, and I actually don't know. Has anyone is this your first podcast? Has anyone like at least?
First podcast.
Okay.
Hey.
Yeah. It's an honor, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I love it. Like when I approached Freya, I was so glad you said yes. I'm like, oh, I don't know if she will. But and we were talking about this beforehand that I just loved getting to know Freya as a person. I even propositioned her with the episode could be around like Freya Lucas, the person, the pivot, the path, but she's too modest. And it's like, no, but definitely whatever can give back to this profession and all that. Because I've just enjoyed learning more about Freya and her history, especially
Right.
within the profession and knowledge and just the cross section side of it. Um, but yeah, we can dive into that as we go.
So Freya, just to get our listeners to know you a little bit better, it's like a first date, right?
I
Um,
know.
so you used to work at the sector, is that correct?
I did. I did. I was sort of, the way that I like to describe it to people is it was my Jerry Maguire moment of my career where I sort of grabbed my goldfish and went along with Jason Roberts, who was the sector founder. So actually, it was on LinkedIn and just read a little bit about this initiative that he was coming up with, which was the sector, which is what we now know as the sector, and reached out and said, look, I don't know if you remember me from our time working together with a previous organization, but this sounds really interesting and exciting. I can't see anything about it online. What is it? What is it you're trying to do? And he gave me the pitch of what it is that he was trying to achieve. And I said, look, that sounds really cool. I'd love to be involved. Wrote some test pieces for him. Based on what I thought the sector might be, and it just sort of snowballed from there. And then the next thing you know, we've got the goldfish and we've packed the U-Haul and we're on board with the sector. And I was there for nearly 7 years.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, it's such an honour to be involved in something that has become such an integral part of many days for people in the ECEC profession. So yeah,
So
wonderful to have been a part of it.
So for people who don't know what the sector is, because we call our profession and our industry is the sector, what what
Yeah.
what what is the sector where you were talking about?
Yeah, it's a website, so it's thesector.com.au, and basically the way that I describe it to people in a really short sort of structure is if you imagine that you're a person who might work in finance, for example, you would pick up the Australian Financial Review on any given day to be across the important things that are happening in the financial services sector, and all of the information is gathered together in one place so that you're not going to 100 different sources to find what you need. We have basically tried to create that for the early childhood sector. So on any given day, choosing 4 to 6 to 8 important pieces of news that people need to know about, gathering them all together in one place, completely free of charge to access, so that when you arrive at your workday or when you're on your lunch break and you want to be across what's going on, whether that's changes in policy or what other services are doing around practice and pedagogy, you can just come to one place and it's all there ready to read.
And then fast forward to today, where are
Mm.
you today? I believe that you're in Radelaide, right?
Yeah,
Radelaide.
Radelaide.
Radelaide. Yes, in Adelaide today. So working with Early Childhood Australia under the BU initiative, which has the aim of building a mentally healthy generation, and that's a relatively new role for me. So started at the end of April. Um, but yeah, really excited to be there. And in the grand tradition of early childhood as a sector, I'm working with a lot of people that I've worked with in previous roles, which is really wonderful, and getting to know some amazing professionals from across the country. Just the depth of knowledge and understanding that's within the organisation is incredible, and it's another great career step and great career role that I'm really excited to be a part of.
And this is with Beyond Blue, right?
Yeah, so Beyond Blue is it sort of works in a tri-organisational structure. So Early Childhood Australia has the remit for the early childhood component of what we do, and then Headspace works in the primary school and high school space, and then Beyond Blue is the third organisation that sort of makes up that tri-organisational structure to put the program out there. So some of the listeners might have known this program previously as Kids Matter. That's what it was known as when it was initially launched. And now it's the BU initiative.
So
And then,
can I
oh,
just ask
sorry.
one more final
Yeah.
question, Barbie? Sorry. Um, if you were to explain the sector where we're at now from a mental health perspective,
Mm,
what would you say?
that's a really great question, and we kind of touched on this in our chat earlier. I think it's a really challenging time for a lot of the professionals that are working in the sector on a number of fronts. Obviously, if you're someone that's newly arrived in the sector or waiting to join the sector, you're sort of watching some of the things that are playing out in mainstream media, and perhaps there's a tension or some type of feeling there. For the more seasoned professionals, I think there is a sense of kind of holding down the fort and having had to hold down the fort for quite some time. I think that in a post-COVID climate, children's the way that children are presenting at care is potentially different from things that educators have dealt with in the past. And so it's certainly a time of a lot of complexity. And I think that many of the things that are happening in the sector at the moment have really highlighted the value of well-being for children and mental health and wellness for educators, and for the need to maybe be open to exploring and thinking about mental health and wellness with more priority than we might have in the past.
Yeah, and I've got one of the I call COVID babies. I think she was born 3 months before COVID hit. So that first few years, um, it was just all a bit different. And then just that
Mm.
knock on that her cohort's the one that started kindy this year
Yeah.
and just seeing the difference there. And then plus all those older children who are year one, year two, and all that, and just
Yeah.
yeah, very very different. And I think on a parent's side too, because I can only imagine how hard it was working at home with your children at home, and just the mental health side on all sides and that impact. Although what I was going to say before, so with the BU program, and I don't want to get it all wrong, but it's free. It's completely free. I know we're not
Yeah.
here to talk about that, but for anyone that was listening and wanted to learn
Yeah.
more about it, and that was the thing I used
Yeah.
to just kind of hassle people about. It's free. Go use it.
Exactly.
um,
So I think it's obviously I can't speak for the government. I'm not the government. But I think that a major part of the program is just recognizing that the more that we can do for children and young people, particularly in those first 5 years of life, the better we can set up long-term outcomes throughout the life course. Like if we can make a difference in children's mental health and wellness, particularly in those first 5 years, it's actually going to save a lot of money down the line. And so in recognition of that, the government have, provided this funding to make it completely free of charge to educators. And the other great thing about it is that some people are not familiar of, it all happens completely online. So it's setting up phone calls, it's setting up online touch points. And Barbie, we were saying before, like we're all so familiar now with the whole kind of Zoom construct and sort of having connections like this in that online space, and we're perhaps a bit more comfortable with it than we were before. But we have this amazing depth of knowledge across the organisation, with people all around Australia who are able to help and support services no matter where they are. And yeah, so it's a free opportunity to connect in with some really experienced professionals from the sector and to get some really solid foundational support around mental health and wellness, which I think is needed now more than ever.
And so why do you think that? Why do you think it's needed now more than ever?
Oh gosh,
I know
again,
it's a loaded question. I know that's a loaded
massive question, but it's a really good question too. That the sigh is like, oh my goodness, like have we got 7.5 hours?
Yeah.
I think that as a society in general, right, completely external to the early childhood sector, we're all starting to realize, the mind body connection and the connection between being mentally healthy and well and being physically healthy and well, and how that plays out across the life course. I think that there's been a massive shift in the way that we parent children, in the way that we view children, in the way that we understand, children as citizens from birth. And, in order to do all of that, sometimes it requires us as the adults to have a shift in our own perspective. We might have come from like a parenting situation, or even I remember in primary school teachers throwing dusters at us, which if you tried to throw a duster at a child now, quite rightly,
Yes.
everyone would be horrified. But if you are an adult who has only had that lived experience, who has grown up in a family where, for example, talking to children about their behavior involves shutting it down, or connecting with a child about how they're feeling involves shaming them or telling them that they shouldn't feel that way, or that, that's not appropriate. Like, how do you get the skills to change something that you haven't seen, that you haven't experienced, that you haven't been a part of? And part of that is, going on a journey of looking at your own lived experience. And sometimes that can be confronting. And that's where that support around mental health and well-being, through the grief and loss of, wow, would my life have looked different if I had have been heard instead of shamed? Sometimes there's grief and loss around that. And in order to improve as a professional, sometimes you have to confront some personal things that you might need a bit of help and support with.
Yeah. I can totally relate and agree with everything you're saying, and I think Barbie, we've shared a bit of our story throughout the podcast episodes as well. And I think we're so passionate about this sector, and I think Barbie and myself are so aligned about bringing the joy and the passion and understanding the impact into this really, really special space, which is really about impacting children's lives, families' lives, and teams' lives. It's such a special, unique workforce. And, I think historically we've been talking about, what does it mean to have pedagogy and practice with children? What does it mean to have people coming back into the workforce as well? But we also have to be realistic about what we're seeing in the media.
Yeah.
There's so much, there's not much good news stories that are happening about
Yeah.
getting people to be so excited about working in our space, and some of the awful things that we're seeing. What's your take on some of those?
Gosh, that's a tricky question to answer. What's my take on it? Obviously, I've been watching it all unfold and just feeling absolutely heartsick
Yeah.
for the children, for the families, for the educators, for people that are kind of tangentially impacted by hearing and seeing those stories. But at the same time, it's really reinforced to me the value, as you said, of showcasing and highlighting the joy not as a means of distracting or minimizing or pretending that the negative things aren't happening, but as a means of bringing that balance back. And I know that we've had a story earlier this week about an absolutely awful incident in a centre in Queensland where
Mm.
the educators took steps to safeguard the children.
Yeah.
And while the outcome of that story was not a pleasant one, I think that the joy in that story is that the educators do what most of us come to work to do, which is to nurture, to protect, to care, to guide.
Mm.
And I feel like the more we share those stories of innovation, of joy, of persistence, of courage, the more we're able to counteract some of the negativity that we're experiencing at the moment.
That's a goal of mine, because if you're listening, you just joined the profession or thinking of it, or watching the news, or high school finishing, like if I was in year 12 being like, would I want to join that profession? Probably nah. Like you go pick something else. And just flipping that on that positive side.
Yeah. And I have two sons, and one of them is finishing year 12 at the moment and is absolutely incredible. He has a little 4-year-old sister, and she is the light of his world.
Mm.
And he would be an incredible early childhood educator. But physically, he's a big presenting man. And he is sort of thinking, well, is that a place I want to put myself in? If I do go into that place, how can I do that in a way where I'm safeguarded, where assumptions aren't made about me and my intentions for being there? And I've seen firsthand, some of those things that potential professionals are wrestling with, particularly male or male identifying educators or aspiring educators. And it's not something that I have a solution for. I don't have an answer for how we change or fix that, but I can't help but think that some of that starts with showcasing the stories of the men
Mm.
and male identifying people in the sector who are doing wonderful, amazing things, who are there to make a difference, who
I'm
are
glad you
committed.
I'm glad you said that, Freya. Obviously, male, got the beard, and I've been in the profession, in the sector, my whole career. I couldn't imagine a world where I'm not in this space in some shape or form. And it does bring me. I have shared a story previously when I first started as a Certificate 3 trainee in 1999, and the owner of the service sat me down on day one and said, "You are a male in this sector. There will be perceptions. You need to make sure you've got some self care aspects
Mm,
to combat the perceptions."
mm,
I think that's always resonated with me, and I think we sometimes need to remind ourselves, because there are some organizations out there talking about, should males be doing certain duties that
mm,
others should or shouldn't be doing as well. And my perspective of that is that everyone should be able to do everything, but I also think about some self-protective measures.
mm,
Things aren't being questioned
yeah.
where there was misintent,
Mm,
and I know for myself, and I shared this story last night actually, where when I was in classroom settings, I made sure that children never sat on my lap. If a
mm,
child went to, give me a cuddle and I was standing, I'd always make sure I went down on my knees and use my arms around their shoulders, for
mm,
example, and making sure that there was really good measures. If I was to be seen to be left alone with children, how do I make sure that there's someone else in eye visibility of where I
yeah.
am as well? So I do think there are some things, and I have to say, I've seen some bloody great male educators in the
Mm,
space, and being able to see difference is actually what helps children to become really good members of society, to be able to
mm,
see diversity in a variety of ways. And I think there are some really important conversations to be thinking about our sector, and I think I'm glad you raised that.
thank you.
I know, so what I wanted to talk about too, and then Frey, you mentioned where your son's at, considering his career, and then same with you, Jamie. Was it 1999
I was less wrinkly and less hairy.
that, that you started in the profession? I
Yeah.
know for me, I pigeonholed Freya for being a journalist. I'm like, yeah, she doesn't know the sector, hasn't worked in it. And I will have to admit I was surprised when I learned more that, oh, she actually worked in the profession in early childhood education and care. But for yourself, if you can think back, like what brought you into education and care in the first place? Oh, for Freya, sorry.
For me.
Yeah, because
Oh,
I feel like a
Jamie.
lot of people know.
So I kind of went against my parents' wishes. So my mum was a preschool teacher and a director with KU, and my dad was a high school teacher. And so when I finished school, my two pathways that I had in mind were law or teaching. And both mum and dad were pushing me very, very hard towards law. And I went into primary teaching, and they both looked at me and went, "What are you doing? What are you go do law?" But I'm like, no, this is I felt called to do it. So I had a primary teaching qualification, taught year one for a little while, and then had my eldest, who's now 22. And then we moved to South Australia. And then when I had my youngest, who's now 17, really looked at what I wanted to do when I went back to the workforce, having spent those precious first years at home with them, and thought, well, I loved having my year ones, but I really feel like there's huge value in the time before they come to school. And so I actually started off doing lunch cover at a service that had opened just around the corner, and I was unqualified because I just had a primary qualification, but no qualifications in the early years. And that kind of ground my gears a little bit. So I did an on the job option of getting my diploma with a TAFE service. Got my diploma in early childhood. But then while I was doing that, I thought, what is it that I really love? Like, what sparks massive joy in me? And it was connecting children with literacy. And so my big vision was that I was going to get my graduate diploma in library and information management, which I did. And when I graduated with that, I was going to go be a teacher librarian. And that was a great plan, except that past Freya had not factored in that there was this little thing that was getting more and more prevalent called the internet, and that schools were increasingly making the choice, instead of having a dedicated teacher librarian who is often paid more than a principal because they hold two qualifications, one in teaching and one in librarianship. A lot of schools have moved to the structure of paying an SSO to just put the books on the shelves and do away with the actual library lessons that support the classroom teachers with their units of learning. So that as a career trajectory was probably not my smartest moment, but no regrets about getting the qualification, and absolutely love having the skill set that I learnt from that library and information management qual. And then from there, moved into a hybrid role with Gowrie SA, which at the time had Professional Support Coordinator or PSC funding. So running the resource centre at Gowrie and also helping out with the training, development and support, so professional development for educators. Did that for a little while. And then, in the grand tradition of funding cycles, the funding cycle for that ended, and moved on to a role in recruitment in the early childhood sector, and did that for a little while. And then did operations management with a really large provider. So had at 1.8 centres that I sort of oversaw here in South Australia. And then from there worked for an educational charity, and then for the sector, and now for BU. So
I was way off on my assumptions, obviously.
What a rich
No
history.
journalist qualifications. So when
Yeah.
you were talking about, I thought she was a journalist. At no point in that journey has Freya gotten any qualification that even has anything remotely to do with being a journalist. She just loves writing, and had a high school English teacher for a dad who was a stickler for punctuation and good sentence structure. So that's where
And
that
it's
comes from.
probably where I got it from too. And I know I'm not the only one that would have just assumed that too. And that's why I also wanted to get Freya on too, because again, my original pitch was Freya as the person. There's just so much more there, like brilliant. I know she will never accept that, but yeah, I put it out there. Was there ever a moment knew like that space was home, like especially you've had such a breadth across and different variables for why things ended?
Yeah, I feel like education has always been somewhere where I felt really comfortable, like education of whatever type and stripe. So I have had moments where I have worked in centre, and I think I sort of left out of the story there that for a little while I was delivering a preschool program in a
Mm.
service and sort of working in that early learning services lunch covers. But I feel like the education space as a whole is a home. And one of the things that stands out to me the most about my time of getting my primary teaching qualification, which I did at the Australian Catholic University, was we had a nun was one of our lecturers, and she forbid us from recording her lectures in any way, shape, or form because some of her perspectives were maybe a little bit counter to the teachings of the church at the time. But I remember her saying, for some of you, you're here because you think this is a job where you'll get lots of holidays, or this is a job where you'll work from 9 till 3. And she basically said, if this isn't a calling for you, get out now. So if you don't feel called to be here, if there's not something within you that's saying, this is my home, this is where I'm supposed to be, this is what I'm supposed to do, this isn't the career path for you. And she said, if you don't know that now, by the end of your first prac placement, you will know. Um, you will know if this is where you're called to be. And so I guess in response to, was there a moment I knew this space felt like home, is not a specific moment, but I know that I have always felt called to be a part of education in the broader sense.
I
Yeah,
find
that's
that prac so important. So I know with my degree, I did primary as well. We did prac every year, and there was quite a lot. Because often I see, I'm not sure what they're doing now, but I knew later on they left out a lot of prac in the first couple of years, and then did a
Mm.
big one later on. But we started with 400 of us. After the first prac, half dropped out.
yeah,
And it's
wow.
that, like, you're calling your home, you'll know after the first prac. So it went down to 200, less than 100 graduated from that cohort. I found the prac was a big part of helping let people know, yep, it's going to be it or not. Because you got those people that do enroll in that course back in the day because, oh, yeah, 12 weeks off a year, I'm in. It's not that. But yeah.
Not at all.
So like if you were to look back to yourself like back 20 plus years ago
Mm.
and there was someone in that at that start of the journey kind of going, oh, this is who I want to be or whatever, what advice would you have for someone who might want to join the sector? Like what kind of
Yeah.
words of wisdom or learning
Oh,
from you?
golly. So many. Um, I guess really think about what the motivation or intention is, right? And that's kind of what's behind that sort of dropping out after the prac thing is, spend some time with children. But I guess my advice too would be get out of the echo chamber. So if you live in a certain suburb or you are part of a certain community group or way of thinking about it, go somewhere entirely different.
Yeah, wow, good point.
Go work on the other side
Mm.
of town. Go work in a regional centre. Go work in that suburb that makes people raise their eyebrows when you say, I'm going to go work in that suburb. Like, go there.
Mm,
Get out of the space where everyone looks and talks and thinks and acts and has the same experiences as you. Go somewhere different. Um, you know, very few of us are trees, like we're not rooted to the ground that we
Yeah.
stand on, right? We have the opportunity to go and experience different things, and I actually think that can be hugely powerful. I think it's very easy to sort of stay safe in your little pond and say this is or isn't for me, but until you've had the opportunity to work in different places and spaces, maybe you don't really know that.
mm,
And I guess the other thing is give it a go. Like if my career path, for want of a better term, has taught me anything, it's just have a try. And if you decide that that thing isn't for you, that's okay. You
mm,
can go and do something different. You can try something you haven't had before. You can have that risky chat with your old boss on LinkedIn and you can say, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but I think what you're trying to do is super cool. And then the next minute, you're part of something transformative, but that doesn't happen
mm.
unless you take the risk and unless you say, hey, what's this all about? Like that sense of curiosity, I guess, would be my biggest thing. Like really lean into that. What does it look like in that different suburb? What would it look like if I had that conversation? Could I be someone who writes for a living?
Yeah.
Maybe I could.
I think what's really interesting about your story is that it's not just been a one pathway. Like as you started talking, I started thinking of like Snakes and Ladders, like the board game. I don't know why that came into my head, but I was imagining the twists and turns, and and
Yeah.
I think you would have mapped that out. But it's interesting this sector, which does offer so much opportunity, and there's so many different branches. Using your tree analogy,
Mm.
that for myself, my career's taken me to work overseas for quite a few years and be across different states and territories, and I'm very proud that I'm now in a leadership role that's a national space, and hearing your story. And I think sometimes educators, as they're starting out, we don't want to get people to go from 0 to 100, because I think the
Mm.
breadth of experience is really important in going through the motions. Because if we talk about generational, I think sometimes it's quite easy, especially in this day and age of quick information, that doing some of the laps is actually a good thing. What do you think about that?
I think that is such a good point, and I think that one of the concerns that more long-standing members of our sector have at the moment is about this kind of mass production, rapid fire qualification space where we're sort of condensing something that might have been a 2 or 3 year qualification into 6 weeks. And I understand the policy
You're
drivers
talking my
behind that.
language. You're talking my language, Freya.
I understand that we have, these current gaps and these projected gaps, and that we need to fill those, and that one way to fill those is to get people through qualifications quicker. But I also fear that we are losing what I like to call the useful box. Like back in 1980, every time my brother or I would unwrap an Easter egg or take the foil cap off a milk bottle or unwrap a Christmas present, my mum would be right behind us, smoothing out the paper and smoothing out the milk bottle cap so that she could put it on the craft table. Like I feel like we're losing some of those long-standing educators who know how to pull things out of the useful box because we're just getting the qualifications out quicker and quicker and quicker. And then that means that the people who are more long-standing in the sector are feeling the dual burden of having been that long-standing person, but also of having to fill in the gaps that might have once been filled in by those longer pracs, by those longer qualifications. And that's sort of contributing to their capacity to show up and give 100%. So it's a nuanced and multi-layered
I
space.
So what I see across the sector, quite often now, is we sometimes know, well, we know we need to have the qualification mix because that's outlined in the national law regulations, but then people start in their workplace, and there's now such an emphasis around inductions and training, and really going, okay, it's good that you got a bit of paper, but actually we've got to like start again. you know
Yes,
and I do find that there is a lot more ownership on, and so there should be, I guess. But there is definitely a different layer of training and development in a service compared to what it was previously.
definitely agree. And sorry, Barbie, I was just going
No.
to say, I feel like adopting that sort of campsite rule of, like we need to, as people who have been in the sector with a little bit of longevity, like we almost have an obligation to leave things a little bit better than we found them.
Mm.
And
I
sometimes
love
that
that.
does mean standing in that gap. Sometimes that does mean, well, yeah, technically it's not my job, but
Yeah.
like, what's the impact going to be if I don't do this? If I walk past this practice, or if I don't call out this behavior, or if I don't mentor and support this person, what then? Like, who loses?
Mm,
If
mm,
I let Jamie do this thing and I don't have that potentially uncomfortable conversation and say, hey, Jamie,
mm,
I noticed that when you were talking to Barbie before, your voice was a little bit elevated. I just wanted to check in with you, see if there's anything I can do to help. Did you want me to come and stand in the doorway for a couple of minutes so that you can take a breath and regroup? Like, if we don't do that, who is the person that suffers for our silence? And ultimately, it's the children. So we're
Yeah.
kind of saying, well, I don't want to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to make things difficult. I don't want to cause tension. I don't want to. And that's fine and that's understandable. But the person that ultimately picks up the tab for that is a child. So kind of taking that lens of, well, part of my ethical obligation as a professional in this space is to to sometimes stand in the mud a little bit and
Yeah.
try and take that lens of how can I leave this space better than I found it.
Mm.
I love that campsite rule.
It's good, isn't it?
I handwrite notes because I'm like old.
I love that.
So I was writing that down, and just even it, yeah, I feel like it's easy for a lot of people, even if you haven't been camping, to understand.
Hmm.
It makes it seem more simple than it may appear at first, especially when you just walk into a place and it can seem more daunting.
Yeah. And I think the other one that I lean on a lot is maybe I can't do everything. Maybe I can't fix this whole center culture. Maybe I can't reform every policy. Maybe I can't control the amount of money that the government does or doesn't put into things. But what I can do is this.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think so many people get stuck on what they can't do or what they can't change. And it's like, okay, you can't change any of those things. You can't make a difference to 150 children in this center, but you can sit down with Barbie for 5 minutes and make a difference for her today.
Yeah. I did a talk yesterday and I did something similar on that. I called it like an infinity loop. Especially my talk was on children currently experiencing trauma, and then just the loop. You could be just that up moment, and you may be that their only up moment in their day, and you don't know. And then they get those down moments, and we can't always fix or change that. But if you still that up moment, at least it gives them that little bit of respite, that sense of depending what's going on, like someone cares or I matter, and it's hard to know they go back down there, but that infinity loop, as long as they're getting a bit more of those ups, it can just
Yeah.
help, just make such a difference.
One of the most profound moments in my career that still sticks out for me, gosh, scads of years later, and this is way, way, way back in the day. I was doing a funded position for tuition. So basically, at that time, children who scored in a really low band of NAPLAN were eligible for free tuition and support. And I was working with a tuition centre who provided that support around literacy. Um, and one of the dads presented in quite an intimidating way physically, but also his mannerisms and his tone of voice. Like he was just one of those people where you just sort of feel a bit, your shoulders go up a little bit when you see them walk into the space. And at the end of one of our sessions, he came to collect his son from the classroom that we were working in. And I said, his son had a really great session. He's making really great progress. He's like, I want to talk to you. And I'm like, oh gosh, like here we go. This is going to be terrifying. Um, and he asked his son to go sit in the waiting room. And I thought, oh gosh, like, okay, he's really going to pull strips off me. Like, what have I done? What's going to happen? And he looked at me and he said, I just wanted to say thank you.
Wow.
And then he started to tear up and he said, like, no one ever took the time to help me learn to read good. And it's insert swear word here. It's taken my life down a path that it might not have otherwise gone down. He said, but you're helping son, and that's not going to be him. And I'm just like, wow, okay. And it doesn't matter what role I'm in and what I'm doing. That's why I do what I do. To be that point in the infinity loop, right? To know that wherever that dad goes for the rest of his life and wherever that son goes for the rest of his life, I've played just a tiny little part in making things a bit better. And that's one of the most beautiful things about working in this sector is that we have the opportunity to do that for someone every single day. And there's not many jobs that you can do where you get that chance. It's a privilege.
Freya, that was so beautiful. I mean, I'm just taking it all in what we're talking about. I think this is a really important reminder to our sector and to our listeners who are and I don't think it's now as of 2025, but if you're listening to this in 30 to 40 years time, I think it still is a really important reminder about what we do. And I think my question to you now, Freya, is if you've got advice for people in our sector right now, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Keep going, get help.
Mm.
Keep going, first of all, because we need you and we know that it's hard. And I can't speak for either of you, but I know for me, at times there's been perceptions when I've been working directly with children that someone in an office far away is making all of these decisions that impact the work that I do with children every day, and they don't get it and they don't understand, and they're making all of these decisions that are
Mm.
impacting me, and they're one step removed. I just want to say that most of us do get it. Most of us are open to hearing your ideas and your suggestions, so please talk to us. And just like we say to children, if there's a child protection issue, tell and tell and keep on telling. It's the same thing for the workforce.
Yeah.
If you go to your ops manager and your ops manager isn't listening, where else can you go?
Yeah.
Who else can you talk to? Can you get help and support from a union? Can you get help and support from an advocate? Can you seek out a community of help and support through podcast listeners or through social media or through LinkedIn posts? Like, don't just get one no or one dissatisfactory answer and stop seeking help. There's lots of different places you can go for help and support. So that's step one is, yeah, well, I guess it's step one and step two together, right? Keep
Yeah.
going
It was
and
good.
get the help that you need to keep on going. And that if you knock on one door and that door doesn't open, don't just stop knocking on doors. Go open another door, go knock somewhere else, go to a different town. If you're working for a larger provider and that's not working, try working for a smaller provider. If you're working in one subset of the sector, go work in OSH for a little while. Like, try something new, keep going. But obviously, you're here in this sector for a reason. Something drew you here, something keeps you here. Find what that is and then find a way to make that happen.
Yeah, I agree so much. And when you said the keep going and get help, I actually put next to it, that don't forget, like, you matter too, and what
100%.
you do. Like, you touched on, like, we need you, but it's like they matter, and that's why it's the getting help matters. It doesn't mean getting help so necessarily you're a better educator, but it's that longevity side,
Yeah.
and for yourself and staying in profession and your own, whether it's building boundaries, I still don't know what they are, um, 40 and still learning, or adapting, or the just trying out somewhere else. It doesn't even, like, you may be stuck to a certain area. And I know for myself, there was two out of school hours care services, same community based volunteer parent committee run on our street, two different schools, completely different in how we ran.
Yeah.
Staff
Wow.
at our service would not work at the other, and vice versa. So sometimes it's also just looking in somewhere else.
Yep.
Um, but again, if you can, and you have the means to try in somewhere completely different too, can open that whole path, um, and your mindset and that shift. And same with your own path, Freya. Obviously, when you started to where it's taking you and still going. I was like, get Freya back in 5 years' time. She's like, well, now I'm
Now I'm
a,
on the moon. Now I'm an astronaut.
yeah, I was about to say something completely opposite. And you just don't know, and it's not necessarily a bad time. Like, and I guess when I was thinking about it yourself, sometimes your pivot can become your purpose.
I
Doesn't
love
mean that
that. Yeah.
purpose is gone.
Your
It's
pivot
so
can
true.
become your purpose. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did when I was in libraries, I did a workshop with my beautiful friend Jess, and both of us had library roles that were a little bit left of centre, which was the purpose of our workshop, right? Was to say, just because you have a librarian qualification doesn't mean you work in a big room with books. You
Yeah.
can go work at a law firm and help to archive cases. You can go work in an art gallery. You can work for a historical society. Like, you can do so many different things with your qualification, was the driver of our presentation. But the title of our presentation was Librarian Career Path. Nobody knows what it means, but it's provocative. And the whole thing was stills from Blades of Glory. And we just talked about, like, finding your purpose, finding what it is that sets you on fire. And it doesn't matter which of the two Blades of Glory characters you more identify with, like the straight laced rule follower guy or the reckless renegade guy. When you connect in with your purpose, that helps you to find the roles that you're meant to be in, that helps you to find your place.
Wow, Freya, what a great conversation this has been. I mean, I have loved this podcast, and for this being your first, you
Yeah.
nailed it. You nailed it. Um, I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your words of wisdom and in your journey. Like, we're so thankful.
No
I, I
problem.
we have a question to ask you though as we start wrapping up. Do you want to ask Barbie?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask. Also, first, I just want to say, like, you've told so many people's stories. I feel like that's actually where I first spoke to Freya,
Yeah.
probably 2018. Finding out a bit about our story, but I've known Jamie and I feel honoured to actually share a bit of your story out
Yeah.
there
Thank
with others.
you.
But my question has nothing to do with whatever we talk about, and this has grown each time we do it. But what is the first gig or performance or live event you can remember going to?
Mm. You're going to put me in a shame hole, Barbie. I'm going to lose my street cred, and the
No,
children are going
no.
to.
You've probably seen them too.
So my first gig, my first live show was Vanilla Ice at the Hordern Pavilion.
Oh, my
Oh,
son would
no
love that.
way. Were there parachute pants involved?
Parachute pants, and I can still do Ice Ice Baby word perfect.
Oh my God. And who did you go with?
I went with my cousin and my
Yeah.
brother. So it was super exciting because my cousin was, I think at the time, like maybe 17,
Yeah.
and I was 12, and my brother would have been 10 or 11. And like out late on a school night, no growing ups, seeing Vanilla Ice. Yeah, it was pretty cool.
That's so awesome.
My 3-year-old would love that. He's been singing, he's caught on to the Ice Ice Baby, and he keeps just singing that part over and over. I don't know where he's gotten it. But his dad can actually do some of the rap. I can't. And then his
Love
face when he
that.
saw him do it, the 3-year-old was like, "How do you know this?" Like,
You're
he
like a
suddenly got,
wizard.
yeah, elevated. So I need to go back and learn that.
You got cred.
Yeah.
Well, with that, thank you so much. And to all our listeners, thank you very much. Once again, we do a shout out to everybody. If you feel there's a topic, if there's a subject, if you would like to be a guest and have you be the very first time interviewing on our podcast as well, you're very welcome. And thank you so much. This is all about how we can support you as listeners to really be bringing this important conversation across the sector around the nation. So thank you so much. And as always, Barbie, what a journey.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to The Bold Blueprint.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can reach out to us on
elm.net.au or
fireflyhr.com.au.
Bye.
Bye.